All right, folks, welcome on back to the College Super Picks podcast. It's been a minute since I uploaded something on this channel, but I'm back. The last thing I think was my wish list for EA Sports College Football 25, which the deluxe edition just released today. Let me know if y'all want some content, maybe a new series around that. It's possible to go alongside this podcast, of course, which is bringing you a huge banger today. By the way, numbers 100 through 76 in my top 100 starting quarterbacks in all of FBS for the 2024 season. This is going to be a banger of a list. Hope you guys have liked and subscribed because these graphics took me weeks to make. It was very tough stuff, but I'm here now, and I've only got 75 left to go after this. Please consider hitting that like button before we go any further. And without further ado, let's get right into it. I lied. Before we get right into it, let's give a humongous shout out to Noah Kim from Coastal Carolina because he's number 101 on my list. Starting off my list at number 100, I've got the quarterback for the Pittsburgh Panthers, and that's Eli Holstein. Holstein has had an interesting career thus far. It's been short, and he hasn't played a single snap in college football just yet. But he spent his first season as the fifth string in Nick Saban's Alabama offense. He was a high-end four-star recruit, got a little speed to him and a lot of upside. It's just he hasn't been set up for too much success transferring over to Pitt, but going from a fifth string to being immediately in a quarterback battle for the starting role is big for Mr. Holstein. So I had to put him in the top 100 as he was miles ahead based off of how his talent coming out of high school of all these other guys. But he's on a bad team. Maybe he has a Cinderella-type season, but I don't think he's going to be anything special in his first year. Number 99 is Owen McCown from the UTSA Roadrunners, son of former NFL starter Josh McCown. Owen played for a pre-Deion Sanders Colorado team in his freshman year, where he actually got a few spot starts and was able to showcase his talents just a little bit. Didn't play great. Then he started in their bowl game last season and a little bit in reserve of an injured Frank Harris, who was very, very good in his time at UTSA. So big shoes to fill for Mr. McCown, and I'm not sure if he's able to do that just yet. From what we've seen out of him, he hasn't been great, but UTSA is a very good team, so he should be solid. A lot of people are saying they are a dark horse to make the college football playoff. Being in the American, they've had a ton of success since the 2020s with Frank Harris, and hopefully for their sakes, Owen McCown can continue that. But from what I've seen so far, I can't put him any higher than number 99. At number 98, it's Cole Snyder from the Eastern Michigan Eagles. Their new quarterback, Snyder, had a very, very good year for Buffalo in 2022 after he transferred there after being a backup at Rutgers, but in 2023 he took a huge step back and was one of the worst quarterbacks in the MAC for one of the worst teams in the MAC. Now, he's playing on one of the most improved teams in the MAC, so hopefully he can return to that 2022 form. At number 97, it's Gary Bohannon from the BYU Cougars, and let's just say it may not be a coincidence that his former team, the USF Bulls, had their most success in a single season in a while with him on the bench with an injury the whole year. Byron Brown, who I'll talk about later, not in this video, but later on, was elite, and Bohannon missed the entire year due to an injury. He was very, very, very bad in 2022 with the Bulls, but also dealt with injuries. In 2021, he was solid, but he was on a Baylor team that won the Big 12 title. So the last time Bohannon was a QB in the Big 12, he won it all. So he could come back and have a very solid year. He just looked so bad in 2022, and that was 2 years ago. We're seeing a Gary Bohannon now in the Big 12 against Big 12 competition with little to no production around him at BYU. Certainly can't do much going off of the stats he's already put up, so 97 is the best I'm going to give him. Number 96 goes to Cam Fancher, who was the quarterback for Marshall last year and is now the quarterback for the FAU Owls. Fancher threw the same number of touchdowns as interceptions last year, but he showed a little bit of promise in those games with the Thundering Herd. However, he doesn't have too much upside outside of his speed, and maybe that arm develops a little bit. Didn't seem too accurate last year. Kind of got carried by his running backs a little bit. He seems like he might do that again at Florida Atlantic, and maybe that's all they need him to do. But, I mean, there's not much here. Cam Fancher, he's a bottom of the top 100 QB, and FAU is a bottom of the top 100 team. So it kind of fits that he transferred there this offseason. Number 95 is Fancher's replacement, Mitch Griffis. So you could say that the Marshall Thundering Herd had an upgrade at the quarterback position this offseason when they grabbed a former Power 5 starter in Griffis. Griffis sat on the bench behind Sam Hartman for a few years, so you would think that he would be a solid QB, but he was very, very disappointing for the Demon Deacs last year. Got benched toward the end of the year, had all kinds of problems, just like that team. They were really disappointing in the ACC, and I think they're going to do that again. And Mitch Griffis now, he has been banished to the Sun Belt Conference to be the quarterback for Marshall. I'm not saying he won't ever have success again, but from what we've seen, it looks like that might be unlikely. Number 94 is Chandler Fields from the University of Louisiana. And the Ragin' Cajuns do have themselves a pretty experienced quarterback, but over the past 2 years, it's been more like 2 half seasons as the starter for Fields rather than 2 full seasons. In those 2 half seasons, he's got 2,200 passing yards, 18 touchdowns, and just 7 picks, completing over 60% of his passes, hasn't done much on the ground, but 4 rushing touchdowns in the past 2 years is something, and so he's a solid QB, but this should be his first year as the starter. Nothing incredible, nothing bad. I'm guessing it'll be a middling year for Chandler Fields and the Ragin' Cajuns. We've got another Sun Belt quarterback at number 94, and that's Grant Wilson from the Old Dominion Monarchs, who, over his first year starting, basically did exactly what Chandler Fields did in his 2 half seasons. Nearly 2,200 yards, 17 touchdowns, 8 picks, completing 57% of his passes, with 250 rushing yards and 4 rushing touchdowns, just like Chandler Fields. These 2 guys are pretty similar. I'd say Wilson's got a little bit better speed. Fields has a little bit better accuracy. Grant Wilson obviously plays a bigger part in his offense because Old Dominion, they don't got a lot of playmakers over there. So Grant Wilson is the guy for the Monarchs, and I've got him inside my top 100 at the starting quarterback position. Cooper Lagos from Tulsa is at number 92. And Lagos, over the past 2 years as the starter at Utah State, pretty much the main starter. He's dealt with minor injuries both those seasons, started 19 games, hasn't ever thrown for over 2,000 yards passing, but he's hovering around 20, just under 20 touchdowns, just over 10 picks a season, with 200 rushing yards a year, which is okay at best, very similar to Grant Wilson, Chandler Fields-like stats. And I think he'll put up more of the same at Tulsa. They're not a very good team, bottom of the American Conference. Kind of balanced run-to-pass offense right there, and that's very similar to what he had at Utah State. I expect more of the same for Cooper Lagos. I didn't mean for it to be this way, but I guess it's cool that Utah State also found a very, very, very small upgrade at quarterback this season, as their new quarterback, Bryson Barnes, is 1 spot ahead of their old guy. Bryson Barnes was thrown into the starting role at Utah, where he was mainly the starting QB for them. Nate Johnson came in a little bit and ran the football, but Bryson Barnes was doing a lot of the passing over for the Utes when Cam Rising was hurt for all of last season. And Bryson Barnes did not do a great job. He was pretty much what was holding them back all year long. Literally had the same number of touchdowns and interceptions pretty much, threw for 1,500 yards. Wasn't a pretty season for Barnes, so he's taken a step down, staying in-state in Utah for his, I believe, senior season. And so he needs to have a good year, one last ride. They'll probably grant him another year after this, but based on what we've seen from him at Utah, I don't expect much. Once again, he's down here in the early 90s. These are just kind of long shots for each of these guys. We're into the top 90 now with Jake Garcia from East Carolina, who's already at his 3rd school. It's crazy to believe that Jake Garcia had an opportunity to start over Brady Cook at this time last year and ended up barely even playing. I don't even know if he played at Missouri in his 1 year there. At Miami in reserve of an injured Tyler Van Dyke, he wasn't anything special either. The accuracy is a big problem for Mr. Garcia, but where Jake Garcia lacks in accuracy, he makes up for in throw power. He's got a rocket for an arm. And for East Carolina's sake, they just went 2-10. They need a good QB to step up. Holton Allers carried them through 2019 through 2022. And last year, it was a mess at quarterback. Alex Flynn was not good. Mason Garcia wasn't good either. Actually, I think now going from Garcia to Garcia might be a big Garcia upgrade. In my opinion, Jake Garcia is going to be pretty solid for the Pirates. At number 89 is one of my favorite and one of the most underrated quarterbacks in all of college football. That is Logan Smothers from Jacksonville State. The Gamecocks have themselves a really good QB here. He played a little bit last year, mainly using his legs, which have been turning heads since he was coming out of high school as a 4-star recruit, committed to Nebraska and was a backup to people like Adrian Martinez and Casey Thompson, before he transferred to Jacksonville State last year and threw the ball a little bit, ran the ball a lot. We don't know too much about the arm, but it was solid enough, and with an elite O-line like Jacksonville State has, he's set up for success, and I think he's going to have a breakout year. This is one of my boldest picks on the entire list, but I'm really, really high on Logan Smothers, and not only do I think he'll get the starting job, but I think he's going to have a great season. At number 88, I've got Connor Bazelak, who's one of the most experienced quarterbacks in college football, actually placing top 5 among active QBs and career passing yards. And you may remember him from his time with Missouri and Indiana in the SEC and Big Ten, where he was towards the bottom of those conferences each year in pretty much every stat. Last year, he went to Bowling Green, saw a slight uptick in each of those stats. Didn't have his best year, but definitely didn't have his worst. He was kind of more of the same. Also dealt with a little bit of injury mixed in there. I think Connor Bazelak is going to have a solid year for the Falcons and possibly even lead them to a bowl game appearance. At number 87 is Mike Wright, who was kind of the last domino to fall among this year's transfer portal QBs. Wright didn't see much time last year at Mississippi State, but the time he did see wasn't great, filling in for Will Rogers on a team that was pretty wrecked injury-wise and just play-wise. They obviously fired their head coach. Before that, he spent the second half of 2021 and the first half of 2022 putting up not so great stats for the Vanderbilt Commodores before being benched for the highly rated 4-star recruit AJ Swan. So Mike Wright hasn't been great thus far. Now he's transferring to another Big Ten school, Northwestern, and he's getting the nod for them because Brendan Sullivan was another late transfer in the spring portal. Good save by the Wildcats grabbing a guy like Wright, but I can't say he's a top 75 QB in college football right now. At number 86 is the injury-plagued Jeff Sims. A year ago, Jeff Sims was on top of the world, having transferred to Nebraska, and people were gassing him up like he was the dark horse Heisman in college football. In the 3 years he had played with Georgia Tech, he had never played more than 2/3 of a season, but he had been solid in all 3 years. And so Jeff Sims went out there for Nebraska and responded by playing some of the worst football we saw all year last year, and sparked what was a quarterback problem for the rest of the season for the Cornhuskers. Sims dealt with injuries once again in 2023, and now he's gone to Arizona State, where quarterback success pretty much lower than it is anywhere else in college football. People are saying that Sam Leavitt, the younger transfer from Michigan State, will get the job, but I believe in Jeff Sims, and I think he could legitimately have a healthy season and possibly put up some solid numbers, but it's probably just going to be more of the same. Number 85 is Zavai Eckhouse. After Washington State's mass exodus this offseason, they reached down into the FCS to find Eckhouse, who, after 3 years at Bryant, has put up 3 straight seasons of 2,000-plus yards passing and 20-plus interceptions. He's thrown the ball more and less over the years, and including a 21 touchdown to 3 interception season, followed by a 15 interception year. He's always been solid, though, and he's even got 4 rushing touchdowns in his career, so he should be a pretty balanced and solid QB for the Cougars, but again, doesn't have a great supporting cast, and making the jump from the FCS to the FBS is pretty big. And Beavers did the exact same thing as Washington State this offseason. After a max exodus, they reached down into the transfer portal to find a very, very solid FCS QB, Gavani McCoy. I have a lot more faith in Gavani McCoy than I do in Zavai Eckhouse, despite the stats difference that they put up. Statistically, Eckhouse has put up much better passing stats on a worse team than Gavani McCoy played for. McCoy was very solid. He can run, he can throw, and with this Oregon State offensive line, they're still pretty solid. They've got a better supporting cast. I think Gavani McCoy is actually my pick to win the Pac-12 or the Pac-2 Offensive Player of the Year. This could be a big step for McCoy, and I think he is more ready and more talented to take that step than Zavai Eckhouse, which is why I've got him 1 spot ahead. Number 83 is Dylan Morris. The last time we saw Dylan Morris on the field, boy, did he not play great. But that was 3 years ago when he started the whole season for a 2021 Washington Huskies team that was an absolute disaster. The Huskies only won 4 games, and part of that was because of Morris only throwing 14 touchdowns and 12 interceptions, barely completing 60% of his passes, and running for a negative yardage. However, Morris has sat behind Michael Penix Jr., one of the biggest stars in all of college football over the past 2 years. He should be a different player. He has 2 more years of experience under his belt, and he's playing for a smaller school against worse competition. He's playing for James Madison, and the Dukes have a pretty solid guy here. They turned around Todd Centeio's career after him transferring in, and they turned around Jordan McLeod's career. Neither of those guys had put up as good stats as Morris has thus far, so we'll just see if they can do the same with Dylan Morris. Number 82 is Wake Forest's Hank Bachmeier. And Hank Bachmeier actually was a very, very good quarterback in 2022 with Boise State, throwing for 3,000 yards, 20 touchdowns, and just 8 interceptions. But if you combine the last 2 years split between the Broncos and now Louisiana Tech, he threw for less touchdowns and the same amount of interceptions, while completing less of his passes and struggling with injuries. Bachmeier is on a very, very bad Power 5 team with Wake Forest, and considering he only threw 10 touchdowns with Louisiana Tech, who plays in the worst conference in college football, making the jump to the ACC and playing in the Power 5 for the first time may not be the best idea for him. He's got some solid stats. I don't think he's going to play any better than he did last year. If anything, he'll regress. Number 81 is Stanford's Ashton Daniels, and let's just say Ashton Daniels' first year as the starter for the Cardinal last year was not pretty through the air. He completed 58% of his passes for only 11 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. It was a very messy season for Daniels and the Cardinal in general. However, he does have great running ability and one of the best receivers in college football to throw to, Alec Iamannor. So while he could make a big jump, he's changing conferences, going to the ACC. That travel schedule is tough. And at Stanford, they don't exactly have the best offensive line either. I'm not betting for or against him, but I'm just saying this 80 spot feels about right for someone who put up those stats, similar to what Hank Bachmeier put up last year. We're now down to the final 5 players in this bottom quarter of my list, which also means we're in the top 80, and Tate Rodemaker is going to start us off. You definitely know Tate Rodemaker's name, because after Jordan Travis went down with the season-ending injury, he stepped in for the final 2 games of the Seminoles season, and who knows, it would be interesting to see where he would be on my list if he had started a playoff game and possibly taken them to the national championship, but instead they were snubbed out of the playoffs and his season ended getting embarrassed by the Georgia defense. Now he's transferred to Southern Miss, one of the worst programs in the country, with little to no production around him, with Frank Gore Jr. going to the NFL. This team, I don't know what kind of scheme they're going to be going with now with a worse running back room than before, but Tate Rodemaker isn't a bad passer. Didn't complete a lot of his passes last year, but he got the job done for the Seminoles, but this is a whole different ball game, so I got to drop him way down. Number 79 is Hawaii's Braden Shager, who is just like the Hawaii quarterbacks of old. In 2022, Shager did not have a great season, but in 2023, he was among the top of the nation in passing yards. However, he was also 4th in interceptions with 14. 26 passing touchdowns makes up for that slightly though, but being on Hawaii, he's going to throw the football a lot, so the passing stats being inflated are a little given. Shager can't do much on the ground, but he's still a very serviceable quarterback, and a lot of these Power 5 teams with quarterbacks below him would rather have him as their starter. Next up is Braden Fowler-Nicolosi, who's a very similar player to Braden Shager, not only because they have the same first name and play for green teams in the Mountain West, and run air raid type offenses, throw a lot of interceptions. He is younger, so that's why I got him just a little bit ahead. Shager put up better stats, and Fowler-Nicolosi is kind of carried by future 2nd, maybe 3rd round pick Torrey Horton by his team, but you gotta respect that Fowler-Nicolosi was on the bench for Clay Millen, who after 2022, when he had led the entire nation in completion percentage, seemed to have the starting job locked down. Millen went down with a season-ending injury on the first game, and Braden Fowler-Nicolosi jumped in and had a solid enough season. I got to put him at number 78 because he's a lot younger than most of these group of 5 quarterbacks who are going out there and throwing for the same type of stats that he does. Number 77 is Cade McNamara, and talk about a fall off. Just 3 years ago, Cade McNamara was the starting quarterback for a playoff team. He had beaten Ohio State. He had gone 12-1, won the Big Ten with Michigan. The next year, he's in a quarterback battle with a young redshirt freshman, J.J. McCarthy, and he loses in week 1. Sits on the bench at Michigan, transfers out to Iowa, one of the better Big Ten teams, and absolutely stinks it up for Iowa, gets hurt, misses the rest of the season, Iowa ended up having a generationally horrible offense, and it looks like it's probably going to be more of the same, though it can't get much worse for McNamara and the Hawkeyes. He's actually pretty talented. Though it's been up and down his whole career, even in that year with Michigan, it's possible that he could jump back, but the odds are against him. The Iowa offense is a meme at this point. They aren't great. And Caden McNamara, he's the leader of that offense, so I can't really put him much higher than 77, as much as it pains me to do it, because back in the day, he was very solid. Ending out this first of 4 episodes where I rank the top 100 starting quarterbacks in college football, it's E.J. Warner from Rice. E.J. Warner is the son of former NFL star Kurt Warner, and over the past 2 years at Temple, he's got 2 3,000-plus yard seasons. The only concerning thing about his stats is the completion percentage, which is a little expected being at such a bad team. He stayed in conference but went down south to Rice, where he should have a better season this year with a better team around him. He throws the ball a lot just like Braden Shager and Braden Fowler-Nicolosi, but limits the turnovers, which is a huge part of his game, and hopefully he continues to do so for the Owls and maybe lead them to a bowl game appearance. That's going to do it for this episode, and I hope you all enjoyed it. Please show me that by hitting the subscribe button, liking this video, maybe even sharing it with one of your friends who also loves college football. If your favorite quarterback was on this list, that doesn't mean I don't believe him. I think he's top 100 and he could definitely have a breakout year. I think pretty much all these guys could end the year in the top 50, but also a lot of these guys could drop out of the top 100, get injured, or regress even more than they already have. And if your favorite quarterback wasn't on this list, the odds are that he's actually yet to come, and he's a pretty solid QB. So be sure to like and subscribe. My name is Ethan, the host of the College Super Picks podcast, and thank you for listening.